What's going on? Boys, thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind-the-scenes stuff. Arm yourselves, life stuff. I'm listening through Starship Troopers a second time, and I'm back at the Officer Candidate School segment, which is good because some of the stuff they talk about is complicated. And this book does feel like a manifesto in exactly the same way industrial society and its future is a manifesto. Except this book, it's a manifesto, yes, but it's also a series of handbooks for different aspects of life, all framed within this mobile infantry context. I've linked it before, I've posted it before, but I'll link it in the description again, my favorite recording of it. Excellent audiobook recording, and then a couple songs referenced in the book, or poems that turned into songs referenced in the book that I'm pretty fond of. But in this video, I mainly want to go over a concept that I loosely understood the first time around, but it clicked this second time around. And I have a feeling there are a bunch of other lessons that the more I listen to this over the years, the more is going to click. And it's the Federation's idea of responsibility and authority, and the way those two concepts need to be balanced. Now, we've talked about this before, but we'll outline some things to build up to this. In the Federation, to become a full citizen, to have franchise, the right to vote, you must serve a term of federal service. And this isn't just military service. Nobody can be denied, no matter how many physical or mental restrictions you have, as long as you understand the oath and you commit to it, they will invent something for you to do in your term. And that means the work you're doing could be completely meaningless. Usually they'll find something meaningful for you to do, or invent something meaningful for you to do. But in the event they can't, you might be doing completely meaningless invented work. But no matter what work you're doing, simulated or actual, the key uniting trait of all terms of service is the fact you will be required to risk your life, whether by doing hard manual labor that will be intentionally riskier than it needs to be, or one of the examples they give is testing equipment in the field that is known to fail. And they do this in part because of this idea that people need to earn things. In the book, they give an example of... There are a few overlapping ideas here. In the book, one of the examples they give about appreciation in what you're given versus what you earn, the teacher, Mr. Dubois, who in the book, in the movie, they conflate Dubois and Razchak. They're different characters in the book. Anyway, Dubois writes Johnny an award, first place for the 400-meter dash, and gives it to him and asks him if he appreciates it. And of course he doesn't, because he didn't earn it. How can you appreciate or respect or use well something you didn't earn, something that was just given to you? It's meaningless. So that's one side of franchise, earning it in your term of service. You appreciate it because you had to work for it. But why is it essential that people risk their lives in their term of service? Why not just make it very hard, but ultimately safe? That's where the responsibility and authority bit comes in. There are a bunch of different things that factor into what citizenship means, what it is, what franchise is, how these terms of service operate. I forget the OCS professor's name, but he breaks this down. Franchise, your ability to influence government and affect other people's lives, is force, and it's ultimate force. It's ultimate authority, franchise is. But authority without responsibility creates catastrophes, which is where responsibility comes in. Or another word for it might be accountability. It's the cost of anything, it is the risk of anything. And in the same way, extreme responsibility without any authority creates madness. That leads to suicide, which, by the way, new suicide reference unlocked. This is one of the songs I'll link in the description. It's called Danny Deaver. There's a situation, I won't spoil it, but dancing to Danny Deaver, court-martial military hanging. That is a vocabulary word or phrase we might be using a bit in the future. I've already pulled it out once, and boy does it feel good to be able to say or tell someone what you'd like them to do, and have it be exactly what you mean, but coded in a way that you're not going to get shit for. So to break it down more, you have wielding force, or your capacity to wield force, on one side, which we're calling authority, and you have the cost or the danger on the other side, which we're calling responsibility. Authority and responsibility. The professor says you need them to be balanced, otherwise bad things happen. And this rolls into the terms of service and franchise. If you're going to wield ultimate authority, which is franchise, then you need ultimate responsibility, which is death, or the risk of death. And he gives examples of imbalances. Let's look at high authority, low responsibility. He describes our government, our society as it is today, or in his day, but it's even worse today. If you give someone the ultimate authority of franchise based solely on the fact they exist, in other words, they never needed to earn it, and they won't be held accountable for it, at least right now, then disasters happen. Because a person with no concept of responsibility will direct their authority to the impossible. They will vote for the impossible, and then they'll instead receive the disastrously possible. And other people will be made to pay for their lack of responsibility, and they'll be made to pay for their lack of responsibility, which is a tragedy because they voted for the impossible, or they directed their force toward the impossible, because they didn't have a concept of what would happen. If they get themselves into ultimate responsibility, then it's a 0 to 100 situation. They were doing whatever because they had no concept of death, and then, all at once, death itself is thrust upon them. There's no scaling. And then the easier other side, easier to explain, high responsibility, no authority. If you are beating a puppy for no reason, without its ability to do anything about it, or toward no end, it's going to lose its mind. So you want people's understanding of the responsibility of what can, or maybe will, happen to match the authority, the force they are being permitted to wield. So now with franchise, we have two factors. We have the concept of earning and appreciating because you earned. We have responsibility and authority balanced. And with voting, with governance, you have the ultimate responsibility matched with the ultimate authority. And then we get into morality, which is interesting because within the Federation, within the Starship Troopers universe, people still operate, or a lot of people still operate, with moral assumptions that we have today, but the Federation itself does not view morality the way we do. To them, morality is scientific. And it's funny, you'll hear people say sometimes you don't know what you don't know. The example we used to use with that is, you have a blind spot in your eye if you didn't know. Within your vision, you have a blind spot. I think it's low and left somewhere. You look it up. There are ways you can show yourself that you have a blind spot within areas you can see, which is freaky. And if you don't know it's there, then you won't know it's there. It took me a while to understand what they meant by scientific morality, because I kept trying to think, how do you make morality scientific? How do you break it down into this and that's? But I was having that brain problem because I was still thinking about morality from our moral perspective. They do not view morality the way we do. When we think morality, we think good and bad. And what is good or bad? It changes. Our assumptions are informed by the cultures we grew up in. For us, even if you're atheist, that's probably going to be Christianity. Even if you're a hardline atheist, you're still operating under a loose Christian morality. It's fuzzy and arguable, and that's clearest to see when you interact with people who are from different cultures. It's a mess. It's easy to manipulate. So when we think morality, we think this good and bad, light and dark thing. When they say morality, when the Federation says morality, what it means is, does this behavior or does this conditioning lead to the extension of the individual's survival instinct to the collective? And not usually in any specific way. On a basic level, will someone choose to do what they think will help others over what will help themselves? And I like this concept a lot because they talked about, or in the book they talk about, unlimited democracies versus limited democracies, or rather limited franchise. Humanity's efforts to limit ultimate authority to individuals or to classes of people they think will wield that authority well. And humanity has tried a bunch of shit. They've tried strictly military rule, which is another thing, by the way. Starship Troopers, it's a militaristic society, but it's not... They make it clear military service isn't what qualifies someone to wield ultimate authority. People in their terms of service in the Federation aren't allowed to vote. They're allowed to vote only after they're out. And that goes for the career soldiers too. A person who served 2 years and got out could be voting on what an 18-year person will be doing, where the 18-year person who's still in can't vote on what they'll be doing. But being a soldier, whatever comes with that, that's not what qualifies somebody to wield ultimate authority. It's not intelligence. There's a doctor in the beginning who talks about it. They discuss it in officer candidate school. Intelligence isn't what qualifies people to wield ultimate authority. It's the basic willingness to potentially die for others that qualifies people to wield ultimate authority, which gets back into the balancing thing. People with franchise need to be highly moral according to this balanced responsibility and authority. And there's some other fascinating things with their ideas about morality. I like the extended segment they do on juvenile delinquents. The Federation believes morality, by their standard, can be conditioned. And they use the puppy example. A puppy pisses on the floor, and you don't want him to do that. You're not mad at the puppy because you know the puppy doesn't know, but you need to teach the puppy. So you catch him in the act, so he knows what you're mad about. You get very angry. You spank him lightly, you shove his face in it, and you repeat this until the dog gets it. And the dog does get it, because you're conditioning using lessons they don't forget. That's what I shouldn't do, because I don't want to be punished. And that creates the baseline. A warm and fuzzy understanding of morality can grow out of that baseline, but the warmth and fuzziness isn't what's important. What's important is the conditioning. Being conditioned away from what you don't want someone to do, and be conditioned toward what you do want them to do. And staying with the puppy example, an alternative, puppy pisses on the floor, that's not what you want them to do, but they're a puppy, so you don't really discipline them. Keeps happening, keeps happening, keeps happening, until finally the puppy is a dog and it does it, and then you shoot it. That's insanity, and that's actual cruelty. And that is the way they describe juvenile delinquents, or how juvenile delinquency happens or is handled, or was handled in Heinlein's time, back in the 60s. Still today, though. Children are never disciplined, the baseline is never established, their transgressions ramp up as punishment stays either nil or ineffectual, and then all of a sudden they're an adult, and when they do what they've always done, now they're either sentenced to death or they're in prison for the rest of their lives. Their lives are over. It's insanity. And it is insanity. That's why I like the lashes they use in the Federation. And the rationale behind using lashings. This is not going to kill you. And this isn't going to ruin your life either. You're not getting executed. You're not going to prison for years. You're getting lashed publicly the same way a puppy is spanked. So you know what you're not supposed to do, and you sure as shit won't forget why you don't want to do it. Fuck the abstractions. It's all true. The prioritization of others over self. You accomplish that with the lashes, but for people who can't or won't abstract like that, at the bare minimum, they're going to remember that they got fucked up for acting this way, and then they're not going to do it again. And at the same time, everybody else gets to see what happens. And hopefully, seeing it will be enough of a lesson that they don't need to experience it. But you do this thoroughly, and then you have a society that, outside the most antisocial people, are inclined to be moral according to Federation standards, i.e., not drinking and driving, not murdering people. And then, once that baseline is established, then you can get abstract. Then you can get warm and fuzzy and noble. And one of my favorite things they said, for any system or philosophy to work, it needs to be organized around what man is. And what man is not good. And that's why they don't condition for nobility. They condition survival instinct. Survival of the individual raised up into survival of the collective. This is not a nobility thing or a morality thing the way we understand morality. on an ironically completely self-serving level, if you want to live in a society that is safe, that's productive, if you want your life to have purpose, you need to get up there and stay up there in a pretty rigid way. Because without regimenting like that, or by leaving it up to chance and by hoping, man's self-serving nature will crash it all back down. So you're serving yourself, ultimately, by being trained and training others not to serve only yourselves. And that book, it makes me feel good to know somebody put it into words. If you can't accept what man is at his base, you're delusional. Anything you build on the faulty, untrue assumption that man is anything at his base other than a self-serving, ugly little animal will collapse. And you'll drag everyone else down with you. I hate people who moralize like you wouldn't believe. And I think I hate them mostly because they lie about that most basic fact. And then they make it everyone else's problem. They can't or won't acknowledge what they are, and now it's everyone's problem. You are feeding your delusion at my expense, and you're pushing it on me. And I hate people who talk about everybody deserves respect. No. Absolutely not. And then people who demand respect based on nothing other than the fact they exist, and they assume they deserve respect. Anyway, let's review franchise one more time in Starship Troopers. You need to earn your franchise, your access to ultimate force, so you'll appreciate it. You need to be conditioned into scientific morality, scaling, preferably starting young, scaling up as you go. And then you need to be made to take ultimate risks to prove you are willing to put others' lives over yours. Ultimate responsibility, so you can have ultimate authority, which is franchise, the ability to have a say over the direction the collective takes. And then there are a bunch of other fun little observations in there that I'll probably need to think about more. As in terms of percentages, colonies have more citizens than Terra or Earth itself does. Civilians have a right to free speech, and they're loud, they are unceasingly loud, they are always dissatisfied, but they never rebel. Why? Because they seethe and they want ultimate authority, but they can't hack it, they aren't willing to accept ultimate responsibility. And ultimate responsibility is a scale too, by the way. The Federation will make you risk your life, but it's not certain death. But you need to be willing to face certain death. And that's why I think they glaze the mobile infantry as much as they do, and I don't resent them for it. Of the people who risk their lives, they risk the shit out of their lives. But the point about civilians hits true for us today. Because we do nothing but complain. We hate everything. But we'll never do anything because we're unwilling to take ultimate responsibility, to take that leap, because we haven't been conditioned step by step to be willing to have the capacity to take ultimate responsibility. So not only do we not have it in us to rebel, but also, even if we were able to rebel and we didn't risk our lives, or we were able to get control of things without risking our lives or dying for what we wanted or believed, we wouldn't be deserving of that authority, and we would fuck it up. And I will mildly, ever so mildly, glaze myself here. I was very pleased with this because I exist in a pit of insecurity at all times, but, and I talked about this in, I think, 2 videos ago. I took a risk recently that was not a big risk, silly risk, but it was a risk, and it could have done me in badly. But I took that minor risk, low chance of anything really bad happening, but something really bad could have happened because I didn't want somebody else to do it. And I was very pleased with myself. I am very pleased with myself, but when I did it, I didn't know why I was so pleased that I did that. And I was so happy when I was listening to Starship Troopers earlier and it clicked. I'm not totally unworthy. But I neglected the warm, fuzzy, noble side earlier. I just took a clarity piss. After the conditioning, after you set the society up, then you enjoy a society which is worth sacrificing for on the positive reinforcement side. I think we're going to cut it here because if we didn't, we'd just start rambling into all the other shit the book talks about. And this wasn't a laser-focused video, but I wanted to cover and share this bit because the authority versus responsibility and the balancing thing, that took me a while for it to click. And I hope you'll listen to Starship Troopers and enjoy it. This book means as much to me as Teddy K's manifesto does. Two of the holiest of the holy texts. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.